Greetings and good morning to each one of you, children of God, who so faithfully attend this Zoom daily morning devotion meeting. Certainly your interest and your zeal and desire to receive daily manna from our Heavenly Father, who in His inspired writings, through inspired prophets and wise men, God has given us wonderful admonitions for our day-to-day life. And to have such wise and so observing writers in the scriptures trying to make divine principles so practical and real to us, applying to situations that we face every day, even though they may be mundane, we ignore them. But even through such experiences, the wise man is drawing valuable illustrations to teach us God's great truths. The book of Proverbs is one such mine of wisdom, a source of knowledge, and a great wealth for God's people, that we can depend upon His wonderful word, drawing from their lessons for our daily life. We will continue our study from Proverbs chapter 27 in verses 15 and 16. Proverbs 27, verses 15 and 16, reading from the word, verse 15, a continual dripping on a very rainy day, and a contentious woman are alike. Whoever restrains the wind, and grasps oil with his right hand. Reading verse 16 again, whoever restrains the wind, and grasps oil with his right hand. These wonderful illustrations that the wise man is using to teach us invaluable lessons are so common. Just as much as it was practical and real in those biblical times when Solomon, even times prior and after, is reflecting upon things that people experienced. And interestingly, it is not different from what we experience at the present time. We all are living in homes built, of course, very skillfully and very luxurious, palatial homes. But with all of these advanced technology, still we may be facing this perennial problem that many people, especially in the rural settings, experience. It is very common that houses do leak when there is heavy rain. I can remember in almost all the houses that I have lived, even though in a city, but sometimes when they are not maintained well, there is this problem of houses leaking. And especially, this is even more severely experienced during a heavy rain season. In the ancient times, they too, in Palestine especially, had flat roofs. And then the flat roof was covered with stone, and they would lay with some stems of plants and cover it with maybe mud and seal it, hoping that it would withhold the heavy rains. But it looks like whatever may have been all precautions taken, still houses would leak. And if Solomon, who built his home as a king with everything possible, but yet experiencing dripping in heavy rain. And you can imagine in poorer people's houses, which are made in our context with thatch roofs, or maybe with tin roofs, or with tiles. Okay, these were, of course, in the bygone era, but all of these certainly experienced leaking, dripping of water. And what annoying it can be. Remember, taking vessels, putting at various locations where the water was dripping. It was such a challenge sometimes when it rains in the middle of the night. Very annoying. And so Solomon, in describing this kind of a bad roof, however skillfully they have made, but over time, human wisdom, of course, may not be holding up to the powers and pressures of nature. And there we certainly see this, and we have probably most of us experienced this problem of dripping water from the roof. Certainly, it is annoying, very disturbing. All attempts are being made to stop this. And some people, of course, with even more recent technology, are able to keep their roofs waterproof, that water would not seep through it or drip through it. Taking this illustration, which is common, which almost is experienced by majority of people, the wise man likens it to a contentious woman. He says both of these are alike. A leaking roof, which is constantly dripping rainwater, to a woman who is contentious, someone who is always ready to pick up quarrels, arguments, never willing to adjust, to compromise, to comply, and to humbly obey. It may appear as if this verse is only spoken to the wife. But I would like to even see that this instruction applies perhaps to either or both of the spouses. And this would perhaps be a good thing that young people who are contemplating marriage should have a very good understanding. While this seems to be a problem, young people should be careful in choosing their partners, their spouses who would be spouses. There can always be problems in a family, just as there are problems in the construction of a house. For however and whatever may be the efforts made, there are always going to be problems in a family. No home is insulated from the problems. While it is God's good intention, when He even created Adam and Eve in the beginning, that they should have a perfect home, He gave them the best ambience of a beautiful natural garden with all facilities, and the setting perhaps was so exhilarating and enjoyable. When God had such good intentions for His children, very soon we see the devil intruding, unable to tolerate God's beautiful creation of human beings, the highest form of creation. Satan wants to bring trouble, discord. If you look at the creation event, after Eve was created from Adam's ribs, Adam saw her, and we have in the creation record that Adam sang that beautiful love song, I would want to say, adoring his wife, accepting her as part of himself, having been taken from him, that she would be her partner and her life mate. Such great love expressed, and that Adam had towards his wife Eve. A perfect family, a beautiful home, well set. But once they go contrary to God's instructions, where their loyalty to God was questioned and doubts created by the enemy, Adam and Eve, believing a lie than to believe truth, yielded to Satan's temptations and ate the forbidden fruit, though it was Eve first and later Adam, both equally and knowingly disobeyed God. But one sin came about into their relationship. Sin not only separated them from God, who is holy, but even began to cause disunity and breakdown in their relationships. When God came, as it were, to investigate what was happening, and when He asked Adam, "Why are you hiding? Why did you eat the fruit?" Adam, without even thinking much, immediately pointed to Eve, who he saw the cause for his disobedience. What happened to such great love when they were newly created and in the very image of God and enjoyed life together and experienced great love? But once sin came as a separation and a barrier, even a breakdown of their love relationship, Adam began to make Eve the cause, blame Eve for his mistake. And Eve likewise blamed Satan. While all this may be true, that rupture in that family relationship of love easily crept in. and soon blaming each other. And ever since, this is a common human practice. We blame others for our very own shortcomings and failures. What happened to that loving relationship? Certainly, in that perfect house that probably we human beings believe begins at marriage, but very soon leaks will develop. So, young people, you know that this is going to be a reality. You cannot live in utopia. You have to face the world, and the tune of disobedience, of distrust, very soon brings about such leaks in relationships. And especially when there is heavy rain, when there are problems, difficult situations, trying experiences, there is always this possibility of leaking. A house with a beautiful roof that was laid now gives way for dripping water. And what an annoying experience it is when the ideal conditions are somehow giving way to annoying experiences. In human relationships, there is always this possibility that when we do not maintain the standards and the promises that we make, there is always the situation of troubles, misunderstandings, and that love somehow growing cold. And so the wise man is informing us today, yes, in life, even though we begin and make good beginnings, there is always the possibility that difficulties and problems would rise. And so, to have a partner, be a wife or a husband, who is contentious, who becomes a source of constant annoyance, could only cause more trouble into such a family. But we need not fear. We will see certainly God's good plan and intention. Just as God made a provision for Adam and Eve, who because of sin, they have rebelled against God, and they have only become enemies. They are at enmity to God, and even later become enemies to each other. God came up with a plan. Though God had to inflict upon them the consequences of their disobedience, God did not leave them. For it was only God who is the answer to our problems. God provided them the plan of salvation through the seed of the woman who would come to destroy the power of Satan and to save those who believe on him. While God made such provisions, he too has provisions for our day-to-day interpersonal relationships, which can easily be severed because of the pressures and tensions that we may face. It is true that when such conditions exist, restraints develop between husband and wife, the spouses, who then, continuing in that situation, begin to habitually complain and irritate their partners. This is very common. And unless plans are made, attempts are made to resolve problems as early as possible, what can happen? There is always the problem of relationships being broken. And so you would not want to have your roof always leaking and water dripping, but you would want to fix it up. Certainly, God also has a plan to fix up our broken relationships. God who knows our conditions, God who knows the problems that we are to face. It is God alone who is able to provide for us. Being frustrated with such a nagging spouse can lead to complaints and arguments and annoying words and relationships. But we as humans can do little about it by ourselves. You may make attempts, but you see how difficult that can be. For to bring a heavy rain or a stormy experience in our lives, we have only one who is powerful, who showed his power over the storm on the Sea of Galilee. Be it a physical storm, his word was enough to calm the sea. Peace be still. While the disciples, experienced fishermen, made all attempts to keep the boat afloat, their attempts were of no avail until they had to get Jesus to calm the sea. And so the wise man tells us, if you are trying in some ways to work to help your spouse, perhaps to restrain them, such attempts, he says, would be like trying to hold water in your palms, oil in your palms, for certainly, however you may make attempts to secure it, oil certainly will drip between your fingers. It is futile. This is another important lesson that young people need to remember. And that is, you always think, well, this person I like, but maybe there are certain things in them which, I may not agree with, or I don't like, I can't tolerate. But you will think, well, I will help to change that person. When sometimes parents may question about their partners and some of the issues that they are facing, children would tell you, yeah, they will change. We will pray about it. But let me assure you, no one can change another person's life. We can do nothing even to change our own selves, leave alone trying to change somebody. We are just as sinful as the other person, and we can do nothing to bring about changes in somebody's life. Maybe over time they will change. I will do my best to help them change. This kind of talk sometimes may seem to be an attempt, but we can make no changes ourselves unless it is God alone who can bring about such changes. It is beyond human ability to change somebody. somebody's habits, somebody's lifestyle, somebody's character, somebody's traits, we mortals cannot change. It is only God who is able to make changes in a person's life. Your attempts will be like trying to hold on with your hands which are oily. You cannot. But we know there is a power who is above and greater than us. And that power is Jesus himself. It is only Jesus who can change a human being. It is Jesus who alone has power to bring about changes in an individual's life. The Bible does give us good instructions that as God intended a husband and wife, their family to be a loving unit, that was the ideal. And therefore, Paul in Ephesians 5:25 commands husbands to love their wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for them. And wives are commanded to submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. Verse 22 of Ephesians 5. Many times, verse 22 is spoken to the woman that they should submit themselves to their husbands, but they don't proceed to read verse 25, where it commands the husband to love their wives. To have a loving family, there needs to be submission and love. Though these are addressed, love to husband and submission to wife, it is mutual. Each other loving the other and each submitting to the other. Thus, when this ideal situation can be only restored when we follow God's instructions through his servant Paul. When there is a nagging spouse, surely disobedience and dishonor to God is the result. But here we see the illustration of a husband and wife to the church and Jesus, who is the heavenly bridegroom, and the church, which is the bride. It is true, as the bride is many times not up to the standards, up to the mark that the bridegroom expects. What does the bridegroom do? Yes, he would make all attempts to change, to help the bride to make herself prepared to be that heavenly bridegroom. But the greatest thing that Christ does is he extends his great love towards the church, which is the bride. With all the admonition that Christ gives to the church, his expression of love towards the wavering wife is what alone is able to change the wayward wife. The story of Hosea and his wife Gomer is one beautiful illustration. However unrestrained this woman Gomer was, that she would run to her lovers, but yet Hosea would go and bring her back. In spite of what her condition was and what her attitude and her behavior, Hosea still was asked by God to love her and to bring her back when she was straying away. And it was only by showing love. He didn't try to change her, but he only showed his love to her, that eventually he was able to win her and change her to be his wife, faithful to him. Likewise, while this proverb is teaching us about conditions which we cannot control, while what may seem happening naturally because of our sinful human frailties, we have only the divine way to set things right. And that is only when we love each other unconditionally. You love not because your partner tends to be good or showing a change, but in spite of, we still need to share our love. And so, to young people, if they're listening to me, remember, love each other unconditionally, for that is how God loved us. For Paul said, while we were yet sinners, God loved us. He didn't tell us, you change yourself and come to me, I will love you. He accepts us just as we are. And it is his love alone that can change an individual. No human efforts, but it is God's great love that can change any human being. These wonderful Proverbs are teaching us such immense and valuable lessons that when we practice this in our lives, certainly it's going to be that change that God would do in us, a change for the better, and also a permanent change that God brings in us. And all that we need to do is to simply let God do this work, receive his love that he grants to us, wooing us back to him, and receiving his love, allowing him to change. We can be that bride who is made ready for translation when Jesus shall come to claim his love. What a blessed experience this is going to be. And so we desire for this change that God can do in us. And may we be likewise reciprocating and reflecting God's kind of love to our spouses, to our families, and to all those around us. For there is nothing more powerful than love, which is able to draw all people. As Jesus said, when I am lifted up, I will draw all men to myself. Just as Jesus, by his love, drew us, we too can let God's love through us draw people to God. May God bless each one of us and have a blessed and wonderful day.